The forest was alive with the sound of a storm. Thunder cracked across the mountains, like the snarl of a god too tired to forgive. Wind howled through the blood pine trees, bending their blackened spires until they groaned and splintered, each one like a dying creature begging for mercy. Somewhere between the rain and the echo of her heartbeat, Aria Vale ran, barefoot, bleeding, broken open by fear and fury all at once. Mud clung to her feet like hands trying to pull her down, and still she ran, through the fog, through the cold, through the memory of what she had just done. Her lungs burned, her throat tore with every gasp, but the sound of pursuit was louder. Heavy paws slamming against wet earth, the scent of wolves, her wolves, closing in. They were hunting her, her own pack. The storm wasn't weather, it was judgment. Lightning flashed, and for a heartbeat the world turned white. Through the haze she saw them, shadows between the trees, eyes glowing amber, shapes shifting with the hunger of beasts that had once called her sister. The rain came harder, slicing across her skin like silver threads. She stumbled over a root, hit the ground hard, palms scraping rock and mud. Her breath came in ragged bursts. Her pulse thundered against her ribs, wild, desperate. The world spun, spinning her with it, until all she could see was rain, mud, and the endless dark. She crawled forward, fingers clawing into the soil. The pain kept her awake, kept her moving. The blood pine forest smelled of iron and pine sap, of wet fur and betrayal. Her mark burned, low against her hip, beneath torn fabric, where the crescent of her bloodline pulsed like an ember trying to live through the storm. She pressed her palm against it, as though she could silence it, hide it from the eyes watching her. But it glowed brighter, and she knew what that meant. They would find her. They always did. Behind her, a growl split the air. Low, feral, close. Her body froze. Her heart slammed once, twice, then broke into motion again. She pushed herself up, slipping in the mud, half running, half falling through the forest's skeletal limbs. Every shadow looked like claws. Every echo of thunder sounded like her name. Aria. The voice wasn't real. It couldn't be. But it came again, riding the wind, deep and mournful. Aria Vale. Her breath caught. For a moment she thought it was him, the alpha who had cast her out, who had stood before the entire pack and named her what she feared most, cursed. Lightning cracked again, and she saw him in her mind, her father's eyes full of shame, her mother's silence sharp as silver. "You're not one of us." The words had been the sentence that broke her world. Now the forest echoed it. Every gust of wind, every howl in the distance, carried it back to her. Not one of us. Rain plastered her hair to her face, stinging her eyes. Her body trembled with cold and exhaustion. She didn't remember how long she'd been running, only that she couldn't stop. Not yet. If she stopped, they'd catch her. If they caught her, she'd be dragged back to the clearing. The silver chains would come out, the chants, the fire, the memory slice through her, the ritual flames, the circle of wolves, their eyes gleaming with reverence and fear. She'd felt the energy before it erupted. The moon above them, full and white, had pulsed through her veins like a second heartbeat. Then came the pain, pure, electric, endless. Her power had broken free, and everything after that was smoke and screaming. Now, the ashes of that night clung to her soul. The storm grew worse. Lightning stitched the sky open in veins of blue fire. The forest floor was turning to a river beneath her feet. Her breath came out in white bursts of heat against the cold. Then, silence. The kind of silence that only comes when something else has taken the forest's attention. She slowed, straining to hear over her own pulse. The rain softened. The wind died. The trees stood still, as if holding their breath. And then, she saw them. Two eyes, bright and blood-red, watching her through the fog, too low to belong to a man, too intelligent to belong to a beast. Her knees went weak. The creature stepped forward, a shadow stitched into shape, its form flickering between wolf and smoke. Its claws hissed where they touched the ground, burning the mud into steam. It wasn't one of her pack. No, this thing was older, wilder, the kind the elders whispered about but never dared to name. Her power reacted before her mind did. Her mark flared, hot as molten silver. She screamed, falling to one knee as light crawled up her arm, pulsing through her veins like wildfire, desperate to escape. The creature growled, a low, hungry sound that seemed to crawl inside her skull. Her fingers dug into the dirt. "Not now," she gasped. "Please, not now." But the light didn't listen. It built inside her, pressure mounting until her bones felt ready to split. She could taste it, the metallic tang of raw energy, ancient and alive. And then, thunder again. Close, too close. A figure moved through the storm behind her, massive, silent. The air around him seemed to bend, heavy with power. For a moment, Aria thought it was another monster, but the way he moved, the controlled violence in each stride, told her otherwise. He was a wolf, but not one of hers. The shadow beast turned, snarling at the intruder. The man didn't slow. He lunged, faster than sight, slamming into the creature with a roar that shook the trees. Claws tore through smoke and shadow, and light burst between them, wild and violent. Aria stumbled back, shielding her eyes. When the light died, the creature was gone. The stranger stood over it, chest rising and falling, breath steaming in the cold. Rain ran in rivers down his bare shoulders. His skin was marked with old scars, each one catching the faint glow of the moon. He turned, and for the first time, she saw his eyes, silver. Not the pale grey of her kind, but molten, alive, like the heart of a storm. The mark on her hip burned again, answering his gaze. She wanted to speak, but the words died in her throat. The air between them was too charged, too dangerous. He stepped closer, slow, deliberate, like a predator who'd already decided the chase was over. The rain softened around them, falling in silver threads. Aria's breath trembled. Every instinct told her to run, but something deeper, something older, kept her rooted in place. For a heartbeat, they just stood there. Two creatures bound by something neither could name yet. Then, her knees gave out, her vision blurred. As she fell, his voice reached her, low, rough and familiar, as though pulled from a dream she'd tried to forget. But she was already slipping away, the edges of her world softening into shadow. Her last whisper was to the storm itself, her voice barely more than a breath. "Not now, please." And the forest swallowed her whole. Before we begin, subscribe to Wild Moon Narratives, where every heartbeat tells a story that burns. The rain had softened to a whisper by the time she stirred. For a long while, Aria drifted between sleep and waking, caught in that fragile space where pain becomes a lullaby and memory turns cruel. The storm's echo hummed in her bones, the smell of wet earth clinging to her breath. When her eyes fluttered open, the world was a haze of silver mist and dripping leaves. And then she saw him. The man crouched near the dying embers of a makeshift fire, his back to her. Broad shoulders glistened beneath the faint light, water rolling off him in rivulets that caught the dim glow like liquid metal. His presence filled the ruined clearing, calm, controlled, yet heavy with something darker, older. He wasn't just powerful, he was inevitable. Her pulse spiked before her body even moved. Her instincts screamed, "Run!" But her limbs refused. The scent of him reached her first. Pine, rain, and the faintest trace of blood. Not the sharpness of violence, but something deeper. Ancient, it coiled through the air like smoke. He turned. Silver eyes, cold as moonlight, yet burning with something she couldn't name. For a heartbeat, everything inside her went still. The forest seemed to bow around him, the rain hesitant to fall too close, the mist curling at his feet like it obeyed him. He spoke first. His voice was low, edged with that raw, magnetic tone only an alpha could command. "You shouldn't be here, Aria." The sound of her name on his tongue froze her breath. Her heart stuttered. How do you know my name?" He rose slowly, and even that simple motion carried weight. His presence was the kind that shifted the air, demanded attention, and promised danger. Up close, she saw the truth of him. The scars carved across his chest, claw marks, bite wounds, reminders of battles fought and survived. His skin was mapped with stories of war, and yet, beneath the savagery, there was silence. Kael Draven. The name flickered through her memory like a ghost. Whispers. Rumors traded in secret around dying campfires. The rogue alpha, the one who'd defied the council, the one whose pack had burned for his rebellion. Her throat went dry. "You're him." He didn't deny it. Instead, he looked past her, into the storm-washed forest, as though expecting the darkness to return. "It was hunting you," he said. "The shadow thing. You drew it." She pushed herself upright, her body screaming in protest. "I didn't call it. It found me." "No," he said, gaze narrowing. "It felt you. That mark." His eyes dropped to where her torn tunic barely concealed the faint glow of her crescent mark. Aria flinched, tugging the fabric closed. "Don't look at it." But the damage was done. His expression shifted, not to disgust, but recognition. "I know what that is." She laughed once, hollow. "No, you don't." "No one does." He took a step closer, and for a moment the air itself seemed to recoil, heavy with static and warning. "The goddess warned me," he murmured. "She said the flame would return, that she'd wear the moon's mark and carry ruin in her blood." Her pulse stopped. "The goddess spoke to you?" He nodded once. 3 nights ago, during the blood eclipse." Her hands trembled. "And what did she say?" He met her eyes. "She told me to find you before the others did, to keep you alive, or kill you if you can't control what's coming." The world went silent, only the sound of rain dripping from the trees, only the weight of his words, cutting clean through the fog. Aria's breath broke on a shiver. "So which is it then? Am I alive because you pitied me, or because you're still deciding?" Kael's jaw tightened. "You're alive because I don't take orders from gods." The forest exhaled. Wind hissed through the pines, and lightning lit his eyes from within. He took another step toward her. "What are you running from?" Aria stared into the mud, the memory of fire reflected in her mind. "Everything." "Tell me." "I can't." He crouched, his voice a whisper of gravel and storm. "You will." Something inside her cracked. The exhaustion, the terror, the months of running. The words came out sharper than she intended. "You think I owe you answers because you saved me? You don't even know what I am." His hand shot out, catching her wrist before she could pull away. Not hard, but firm. And then, it happened. The moment their skin touched, the world shifted. The mark on her hip seared to life. The same heat flared against his chest, where a half-hidden scar pulsed in answer. Her breath caught. The air thickened, humming. Kael's expression changed, confusion, then something raw, dangerous. "You," he whispered. "The bond." She ripped her hand away. "No, that's not possible." But they both felt it, the invisible thread pulling tight between them, an ancient rhythm older than blood or name. The moon's claim, the forbidden mark of a fated bond. Aria staggered back. "No, you can't be." Kael's voice was low, almost pleading. "Aria, stop. Don't say my name like that." Lightning split the sky. The fire beside them hissed and died, leaving only the sound of their breaths. Kael stepped forward, the storm catching in his hair, his eyes burning brighter. "You think I want this?" Aria's tears mixed with rain. "You said the goddess warned you about me." He nodded slowly. "She did." "Then why are you here?" His silence spoke first, then, softly, "Because she didn't warn me enough. Her pulse jumped. What does that mean? It means, he said, she didn't tell me I'd feel you. The words hit harder than any blow. The storm outside roared again, thunder echoing through the valley, but neither moved. The tension between them was unbearable, part fear, part something she refused to name. He turned away, jaw clenched. You should sleep. The storm will hide our scent till dawn. I don't trust you. I didn't ask you to. He looked over his shoulder, silver eyes unreadable. But if I wanted to hurt you, Aria, you wouldn't be breathing. Her body went cold. Yet, beneath the fear, something else stirred, something dangerous. Then why didn't you? She whispered. Kael's gaze softened, barely. Because when I saw you fall, I felt the world stop, and that terrifies me more than any curse. The words lingered between them, thick as smoke. She didn't reply. Couldn't. He turned away again, stepping into the mouth of the forest's shadow. Sleep. Tomorrow the packs will smell the fire. They'll come. And if you're still alive by dawn, we'll talk. And then he was gone, swallowed by the mist. Aria sat in silence, trembling, every nerve alive with the echo of his touch. The mark still glowed faintly beneath her skin, matching the rhythm of her heart. She pressed a hand over it, whispering into the dark, "What are you doing to me?" The wind didn't answer, but somewhere beyond the trees, a wolf howled, a deep mournful sound that carried her name to the storm. The rogue alpha had found her, but whether he was her savior or her doom, only the moon would decide. If you're still listening, don't stop now. This story burns deeper than fate. Subscribe to Wild Moon Narratives, where every heartbeat tells a story that scars and saves. The storm broke just before dawn. Rain eased into a mist that clung to the trees like breath, soft and cold. The forest no longer screamed. It whispered. Every leaf dripped with silver. Every shadow seemed to listen. The world had gone still, as if waiting. Kael moved first. He stepped from the darkness where he'd kept watch, his presence a silhouette carved against the pale light. His gaze flicked toward Aria, who sat curled near the ashes of their fire, her arms wrapped around her knees. She hadn't slept. Her hair clung to her face, her skin pale beneath the faint glow of her mark. The air around her pulsed softly, like her body was humming with something it couldn't contain. Kael studied her, not as a hunter, not as a savior, but as a man standing before a storm he didn't know how to stop. "We can't stay here," he said quietly. "The packs will track the fire's scent by midday." She didn't move. Her voice came out hoarse, distant. "Let them." He frowned. "You want to die out here?" Her lips curved, not in humor, but in resignation. "Maybe the world would be better if I did." He stepped closer, the sound of his boots heavy against the damp earth. "You don't get to say that." She looked up, meeting his silver eyes. There was no anger in hers, only exhaustion, old, bone-deep exhaustion. "You don't know what I've done. Then tell me," he said, "make me understand." For a long moment, neither spoke. The forest around them breathed, the kind of silence that carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken things. Then she rose, slowly. "Fine," she whispered. "You want the truth? Follow me." They walked for hours, deeper into the woods, until the pines gave way to jagged stone and overgrown ruins. A temple, its bones half buried, its columns strangled by vines. The air smelled of dust, moss, and memory. Aria stopped at the threshold. "This is where it began," she said softly. Kael's gaze swept the ruin. "What is this place?" "Once," she murmured, "it was the temple of Saloon, the Moon Mother. My pack used to come here during every blood rite. Offerings, prayers, blessings for new alphas." She stepped inside. The floor was cracked, the symbols etched into the marble faint beneath grime and time. But when her fingers brushed them, the carvings pulsed faintly, alive, remembering her. Kael followed her in, cautious, reverent almost. "And what happened here?" Her breath trembled. I was born here. He froze. Born? Not in a home, not in a den, here, under the blood moon. She smiled faintly. My mother said I came into this world screaming louder than the storm. The midwives refused to touch me. She turned to face him. Her eyes shimmered, not with power, but pain. They called me the child of the forbidden moon, said my birth broke the balance, that I was touched by fire instead of light. Kael said nothing. He only listened, jaw tight, shoulders tense, as if bracing for every word to wound him too. I didn't understand it then, she continued, but when I turned 13, the truth came for me. She drew in a slow breath, the air trembling with the memory. My first shift. Lightning cracked somewhere far away, as if the memory itself had called it. The change was supposed to be sacred, the whole pack gathered under the moon. I remember my mother's hand shaking in mine, the way she whispered, "You're ready." Her voice broke, but when it happened, I didn't turn into a wolf. Kael's head tilted slightly. His breathing changed, slower, shallower. Aria's hands trembled. I turned into something else. Something made of smoke and flame. I remember their screams, the smell of burning fur. When it was over, half the village was ash. Silence. The kind that bleeds. Kael's expression didn't shift, but his eyes betrayed the storm inside him. You were a child, he said quietly. I was a monster. You lost control, he corrected. There's a difference. She turned on him, voice sharp. They didn't see a difference. They saw death in my skin and cursed me with every breath I took. My own alpha marked me as tainted, said the moon rejected me. Her breathing hitched. And he was right. Every time I feel the shift coming, I can feel her inside me. The fire. Waiting. Laughing. Begging to be free. Kael took a step toward her, slow and deliberate. What happens when you resist it? She looked at him, eyes wild. It hurts. Like drowning in light. So you stopped shifting? She nodded. For years. I learned to run instead of fight. I learned to hide instead of heal, until the night I found out the shadows could smell my fear. Kael's jaw tightened. The thing that attacked you wasn't the first, she said. They've been following me since the eclipse, drawn to what I carry. He stared at her for a long time, then finally said, You're not cursed, Aria. You're chosen. She laughed bitterly. Chosen to destroy everything I touch. No, Kael said, voice rough. Chosen to burn what needs to end. Something in his tone, low, certain, aching, pulled her attention. She met his eyes and saw it then, the same haunted look she carried, the same guilt. You talk like you understand, she said. I do. He turned from her, walking to the temple wall. His hand brushed across a weathered mural, wolves kneeling before a silver flame. I killed my own beta, he said quietly. He was my brother, my blood. Her breath caught. He betrayed me, Kael continued, sold our pact to the council, said my way, my rules, would destroy the order of alphas. Maybe he was right, but when I found him, I didn't think so. I tore his throat out before he could speak. He turned back to her. And when the council came for me, I didn't run. I burned the den myself. Aria's heart clenched. You destroyed your pack. They'd already been destroyed, he said softly. I just buried the ashes. The silence between them stretched thin, two souls fractured by fire, standing in the ruins of gods. Then Kael stepped closer. You think your curse makes you less, but it's not the mark that damns you, Aria. It's the fear of it, the fear that keeps you small. She looked away, trembling. You sound like someone who's stopped being afraid. He smiled faintly without warmth. No one stops being afraid. We just learn to fight beside it. She stared at him, searching for something. Hope, maybe. But all she saw was the truth. Brutal, quiet truth. And for the first time, something inside her loosened. The tension in her shoulders eased. Her hands stopped shaking. For the first time since the night her life fell apart, she didn't feel completely alone. "You should hate me," she whispered. "Maybe," Kael said, eyes steady on hers. "But I don't." "Why?" "Because I've killed for less reason than what you've survived." The words hit deep. She wanted to look away, but couldn't. His gaze held her, fierce, unflinching. And beneath the strength, she saw it, the same wound she carried. The same longing to be more than what the world called them. "Death isn't the curse," he murmured. "It's the fear of what comes after." The air between them thickened, alive with something unsaid. Outside, the wind howled through the ruins, as if the goddess herself had paused to listen. The fire flickered low, light washing across their faces in gold and shadow. Aria swallowed hard. "And what if I lose control again?" Kael stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his breath against her skin. "Then I'll stop you." "You'll kill me." "No," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I'll bring you back." Her breath caught. For a heartbeat, she almost believed him. The fire crackled once more before dimming, leaving them in the soft glow of dawn filtering through broken stone. Two souls, cursed and bound by flame, standing beneath the forgotten gaze of a goddess who wasn't done with them yet. They thought their pain was the end. But the moon had other plans, because where there is fire, there is always something waiting to rise from the ash. If this part made your chest tighten, if it made you feel, subscribe to Wild Moon Narratives, because here, every scar tells a story worth bleeding for. Dawn crept over the forest like a secret afraid to be told. Pale silver light spilled through the branches, soft but restless, the kind of morning that carried both promise and warning. Aria stood at the temple's edge, staring into the endless stretch of trees. She could feel it, the pull in her blood, the hum beneath her skin. The mark on her shoulder throbbed faintly, warm as breath. Kael watched her from a few paces away. He hadn't said a word since the night's confession. There was nothing left to say. Only the sound of wind through broken stone, the hush of a world trying to remember itself. "There's a place," he said finally, voice low. "North of here. The Moon Sanctum. No pack dares step near it. They say it's where the goddess first touched the earth." Aria turned. "And you want to take me there?" "No," he said, eyes glinting. "You need to go there. I'm just making sure you survive the journey." She almost smiled at that. Almost. But something inside her stirred, something she didn't yet understand. The same whisper she'd felt since the storm, the same pull that kept dragging her forward when every instinct screamed to turn back. She didn't argue. She simply nodded. "Then let's go." The journey began in silence. They crossed rivers swollen with rain, climbed ridges slick with moss. Every step deeper into the northern wilds brought colder air, thinner light. The trees grew twisted, bark silvered by age, their roots curling like claws around forgotten bones. Sometimes Aria caught fragments of sound in the wind, voices that weren't quite there. Old prayers, old screams, the echoes of wolves that had died centuries ago still howling for the moon. Kael didn't seem to hear them, or maybe he did and chose not to. At night, when the fire burned low, he'd watch her. She'd sit apart, tracing her fingers over the scarred ground, or staring into the flames as if they spoke a language only she could hear. Once, he asked quietly, "What do you see when you look at the fire?" She hesitated. "Truth." "And what's the truth?" She looked up, her eyes reflecting gold in the glow. "That it always takes before it gives." It took 3 nights to reach the mountains. The path narrowed into stone steps carved into the cliffs, half buried beneath ice. Above them, the peaks glowed faintly under moonlight, not white, but silver blue, almost alive. Kael's breath came steady behind her. She could feel his presence. Solid, grounding, yet distant, like thunder behind clouds. When they reached the summit, the air changed. The wind fell silent. Even the world seemed to hold its breath. Before them stretched the Moon Sanctum, a cavern mouth carved into pure crystal, its walls alive with veins of light. Runes shimmered faintly across its surface, old and patient, older than any alpha line. Aria stepped closer, and the runes flared, one by one, like waking stars. Kael tensed, hand instinctively reaching for his blade. "What's happening?" "It's reacting," she whispered. "To me." The ground trembled beneath her bare feet. The air thickened, charged, humming with something ancient, power layered over centuries of silence. Then a whisper broke through the air, soft as breath but echoing like thunder. "The wolf the goddess warned them about." Aria froze, her pulse hammered against her throat. "Will bring light, or ruin." The voice came from everywhere, the walls, the stones, the wind that wasn't wind. Kael moved toward her. "Aria!" But before he could reach her, the ground cracked. Light surged beneath her, wrapping around her body like liquid fire. Her mark ignited, bright and blinding. She screamed, not in fear, but in agony. Visions tore through her mind, a city burning. Wolves chained to altars of silver, the sky split open by moonlight and blood. Kael kneeling, his hands bound by flame, his eyes begging her to stop. And her own reflection, monstrous, radiant, terrible, standing above him. The power surged through her veins, hot, infinite. She fell to her knees, trembling, gasping for air that felt like fire. Kael caught her before she hit the ground. "Aria, look at me." Her eyes snapped open, glowing white. For a heartbeat, she didn't recognize him. She didn't recognize herself. "You're not the curse, Aria," he murmured, holding her face in his hands. "You're the prophecy they fear." She tried to speak, but her voice came out fractured, split between two worlds. "Kael, it's too much. I can feel it, like it's tearing me apart." "Then let it tear," he said. "And when it's done, you'll still be here. I'll make sure of it." The words shouldn't have meant anything, but they did. Because when he said them, something inside her steadied. The light around her dimmed, pulsing in rhythm with her breath, with his heartbeat pressed against hers. Slowly, painfully, she forced herself to stand. The cave trembled again, but this time it wasn't rage. It was recognition. The runes on the walls blazed, casting long shadows across the crystal. Symbols rearranged themselves. A wolf surrounded by flame, a crescent moon above it. The prophecy, the truth. Aria stepped closer, drawn as if by invisible threads. She reached out, her fingertips brushing the carved stone. The moment she touched it, the world dissolved. Darkness. Then, light. She stood in a vast, endless plain beneath a sky of shifting stars. The air shimmered with silver dust. Before her stood a figure cloaked in moonlight, face hidden, voice soft and ancient. "Child of fire," the goddess said, "do you know what you carry?" Aria shook her head. "The world calls it a curse, but what you bear is balance. Fire to the moon's shadow, light to the wolf's hunger." The goddess moved closer. "They will fear you because they must, because prophecy demands fear before faith." Aria's voice trembled. "What am I supposed to do?" "End what began in blood. Burn what has forgotten how to kneel." The words echoed, wrapping around her like wind. "And when the time comes," the goddess whispered, "choose your heart or your fate. You cannot keep both." The world shattered again. She gasped, stumbling back into the sanctum. Kael's arms caught her once more. The runes had gone dark. Only the echo of her heartbeat filled the silence. He looked at her, jaw tight. "What did you see?" Her eyes flicked toward the wall. "Everything." "Tell me." "I can't," she whispered. "If I do, it becomes real." He wanted to argue, but the way her voice cracked stopped him. She wasn't hiding the truth. She was holding it back to keep him safe. The air shifted again, not wind, but the kind of movement that lives beneath the skin of the world. The ground trembled, subtle but certain. Something ancient had woken. Far below, deep within the earth, something began to stir. Slow, hungry, patient. Aria clutched her arms around herself. The mark on her shoulder pulsed once, twice, then faded to a dull ember. "It knows I'm awake," she murmured. Kael's eyes narrowed. "What does?" She turned to him, voice barely a whisper. "The thing the goddess warned them about." The look in her eyes, fear, yes, but also defiance, told him the truth. This wasn't just her curse anymore. It was coming for both of them. They left the sanctum before dawn. Behind them, the crystal walls dimmed, swallowing their light, sealing their footsteps in silence. Neither spoke as they descended the mountain, but both felt it. The bond shifting, tightening, threads of power weaving between them like roots finding earth. When the wind passed through the peaks, it carried whispers, no warnings, not prayers, but a name. Aria Vale. The wolf the goddess warned them about, and somewhere in the distance, something howled in answer. Every prophecy begins as a whisper, and ends as a scream. The goddess had spoken. The bond had been forged, but destiny never walks alone. If this chapter made your pulse race, if you felt the storm in your chest, subscribe to Wild Moon Narratives, because here, the moon remembers every promise and every sin. The air was wrong. Kael felt it before he heard it. That ripple through the trees, the faint vibration in the soil beneath his boots. The forest was holding its breath. Every instinct in him screamed danger, but he didn't know from which direction it would come. Aria walked a few paces ahead, her hand brushing the rough bark of a tree, her eyes distant. The morning light caught in her hair, silver fire glinting with each step. She didn't see the way the shadows moved between the trees. Kael did. "We're being watched," he murmured. Aria didn't flinch. By who? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. A voice broke the silence, sharp, cold, too familiar. "By those who once followed you, Alpha." Kael turned slowly. Out of the trees stepped 5 wolves in human form, dripping rain and distrust. His pack, or what was left of them. His beta, Rin, stood at the front, tall, scarred, and seething. His eyes locked on Aria, like she was the rot spreading through the forest. "You've lost your mind," Rin snarled, "bringing her here." Kael didn't move. His voice was quiet, dangerous. "You should watch your tone." "No, Alpha, you should watch yours. That thing beside you, she's the flame of ruin." The words hit the air like a blade. Aria froze. Her throat tightened, her heart pounding so hard it ached. She'd heard that name before, whispered by her own people before they cast her out. It had followed her like a curse ever since. Kael stepped between them. "She has a name. Say it." Rin laughed, bitter and hollow. "Names don't matter when the blood she carries can burn the world." Aria's breath caught. She wanted to deny it, to tell them she wasn't what they thought. But the mark on her shoulder pulsed, betraying her. The beta's gaze flicked to it, and his expression twisted into horror. "You see, the goddess warned us. The wolf of fire would walk again." The others murmured, restless, uncertain. Their fear was tangible. It crawled through the clearing like mist. Kael's jaw tightened. "She's not your enemy." "Then why is the forest dying where she steps?" Rin snapped. "Why did the sanctum awaken after centuries of silence?" Before Kael could answer, the wind changed. The scent hit them, cold iron and decay. Something was coming. From the tree line, darkness moved. At first, it looked like smoke. Then the shapes solidified, hulking forms with eyes like burning coals, their bodies half wolf, half shadow. The shadow beasts, the cursed remnants of wolves lost to the moon's wrath. Rin stepped back, fear flickering across his face. "What? Run!" Kael barked. The beast lunged from the trees. Chaos erupted. Wolves shifted mid-motion, bones cracking, claws tearing earth. the air filled with snarls, screams, the metallic tang of blood. Aria spun, eyes wide. One of the creatures leapt at her, its fangs inches from her throat. Instinct took over. She raised her hands. Fire erupted, not the soft glow she'd struggled to control. This was blinding, pure, alive. The flames burst from her palms, silver white and wild. The beast screamed as the light consumed it, dissolving into ash that vanished into the wind. But the fire didn't stop. It leapt from her skin, tracing across the ground, licking the trees. The earth hissed under its touch. The air shimmered, thick with heat and terror. The battle stopped. Every eye turned toward her. Kael stood frozen, watching the fire curl around her body like a living thing. It didn't burn her. It bowed to her. Aria trembled. "I didn't mean to—" Rin's voice cut through her panic. "She's possessed. Look at her." Kael's snarl tore through the clearing. "Enough." But it was too late. Fear spreads faster than truth. Rin's gaze darted to the others. "How many more will die before you see it? She's the reason the beasts are here." Aria's heart shattered at the accusation. It sounded so familiar. The same words her father had screamed before he banished her. Before her power had taken everything she loved. Kael stepped forward, eyes blazing. "She saved you." "Saved us?" Rin spat. "Look around, Alpha. You call this salvation?" Smoke coiled through the trees. The ground where her fire had touched was blackened, lifeless. The scent of ash hung thick in the air. Kael turned to her, his expression caught between pride and pain. "You did what you had to." But she couldn't look at him. Couldn't look at any of them. Their faces, fear, disgust, awe, blurred together. "This is why I can't stay," she whispered. Her voice was soft, but it carried. Every wolf heard it. Before Kael could reach for her, she turned and ran. Through the trees, through smoke and fog, her bare feet tearing against the ground. The forest opened around her, swallowing her whole. "Aria!" Kael's voice roared behind her, but she didn't stop. Branches tore at her arms. Rain cut through the smoke. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to get away. Away from the stairs, away from the guilt that crawled under her skin. Her mark still burned, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. The power inside her felt alive, angry, desperate to be released. When she finally stumbled to a halt at the edge of a cliff, the world below her blurred into fog. She sank to her knees, the taste of salt and blood on her lips. Tears came, hot, relentless. "This is what I am," she whispered to the wind, "death in disguise." The storm didn't answer, only the echo of her own words, fading into the distance. She hugged herself, shivering. Every breath felt like fire scraping her lungs. Behind her, far away, Kael's roar broke the silence, raw, broken. But he didn't follow. He couldn't. Because the moment his pack turned their backs, the alpha bond fractured. He could no longer lead them, not without tearing the pack apart. And somewhere in the dark, the forest shifted again. The same beasts she'd burned to ash began to reform, smoke curling back into shape. The darkness was learning from her light. Her power had saved them once. But it had also awakened something far worse. Hours passed. The storm quieted. Aria sat at the edge of the world, her body still trembling. Her fire had gone cold, but the ache in her chest remained. Every breath of wind carried the same question she refused to answer. Why did the goddess choose her? Because if this was destiny, it felt more like punishment. She pressed her palm against the mark on her shoulder, half expecting it to pulse again. But it stayed dark, a ghost of light buried under skin. Her throat tightened. Somewhere deep down, she wanted to believe Kael's words, that she wasn't a curse, that she was something more. But when she closed her eyes, all she saw were the faces, the wolves who'd looked at her with the same fear her own family had once worn. It didn't matter that she'd saved them. It didn't matter that she'd fought back. All they saw was fire. All they saw was ruin. Back in the forest, Kael stood among the ashes. His wolves had gone silent, their eyes downcast. He looked at them, at the pack he'd led, the family he'd bled for, and something inside him fractured. "You turned your backs on your alpha," he said quietly. Rin met his gaze, defiant but shaken. "We turned our backs on madness." Kael stepped closer until the space between them hummed with fury. Madness is watching someone burn for your salvation and calling her a monster. The beta didn't answer. None of them did. Kael's voice dropped to a growl. "You fear her because she mirrors everything you've buried, your hunger, your power, your sins." He turned away, his jaw clenched. "But I'm not done with you. Or her." And then he was gone, vanishing into the night, following the faint scent of smoke and tears that led north. In the end, it wasn't claws or teeth that drew first blood. It was fear, the kind that whispers louder than truth. Aria ran not because she wanted to escape, but because she didn't know how to stay. And Kael followed not as an alpha, but as a man who knew the weight of being misunderstood. The world had chosen its sides, but destiny was just getting started. If your heart ached for her, if you've ever been feared for the fire inside you, subscribe to Wild Moon Narratives, because here we tell the stories the moon remembers, even when the world forgets. Love, the forest had gone quiet, not the peace of rest, but the kind of silence that comes after something breaks. Kael followed the faintest trace of her, the scent of rain, ash, and moonlight still clinging to the air. He hadn't slept in days. The blood on his hands had long dried, the wounds across his chest half healed. But his heart, that was another story. Each step took him deeper into the frozen wilds, where the river cut through the forest like a scar. The snow came down in quiet sheets, hiding everything it touched. The world seemed to hold its breath, as if the goddess herself waited to see what he would do next. Then he saw her. At first, he thought it was a trick of the light, a shape half buried in snow, unmoving, fragile. But the closer he came, the harder his chest tightened. It was her, Aria. Her skin was pale, her lips blue, her body trembling with the faintest pulse of life. The mark on her shoulder flickered weakly beneath torn fabric, a dying ember. For a moment, Kael just stood there, staring down at her. He'd imagined finding her 100 ways, standing defiant, alive, furious, never like this, never this still. Then instinct took over. He dropped to his knees, brushed the snow from her face, and gathered her into his arms. Her body was cold, so cold it burned against his warmth. "No," he whispered, voice breaking. "Don't you dare." Her breath ghosted faintly against his throat, there, but fragile. He pressed his forehead to hers. The cold bit through his skin, but he didn't care. He could feel the faint hum of her mark beneath her heartbeat. Still alive, still fighting. Without thinking, he shifted. His wolf stirred beneath his skin, heat flooding his veins. The air shimmered around him as his energy flared, his own mark glowing bright against the darkness. He carried her through the storm, through trees and shadow, until the forest opened into a hidden canyon, a place no pack had ever found, a cave carved by the river centuries ago, hidden beneath frozen vines and the whisper of falling snow. His refuge. His exile. He laid her gently near the fire pit, striking flint with trembling hands until sparks caught on dry bark. The flames licked upward, painting the cave walls in gold. Aria didn't stir. Kael removed his cloak and wrapped it around her, his jaw clenched. Her pulse was faint, weaker than he wanted to admit. He could hear it, feel it, almost taste it through the bond that tethered them. "You're not dying on me," he said quietly. "Not after all this." He reached for a small pouch at his belt, crushed herbs between his fingers, mixed them into a bowl of melted snow. When he brushed the concoction over the cut along her collarbone, she flinched, the first sign of life since he'd found her. Her eyes fluttered open, and the world stopped. Those eyes, that wild, storm-colored gaze, met his, dazed and disoriented. "Kael?" He exhaled a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "You're safe," he murmured. She blinked slowly, her voice a ghost. "Why did you come?" Kael sat back, his expression hard to read. "Because I couldn't do anything else." Silence filled the cave. The fire crackled softly, the scent of smoke and pine weaving between them. He looked away, hands braced on his knees. "You shouldn't have run." Her voice trembled. "Your pack—" "My pack," he interrupted, "is no longer mine." The confession fell heavy, final. He turned his gaze toward her again, eyes like molten silver in the firelight. "They chose fear over loyalty. You're not the first they've abandoned, and you won't be the last." She swallowed hard. "You lost everything because of me." He shook his head. "No. I lost everything because I let them decide who I was supposed to protect." The silence stretched, deep and raw, the kind that stripped both of them bare. Aria looked down at her hands. They were trembling, not from cold, but from something deeper. Shame, confusion, fear. "You should have left me," she whispered. Kael leaned closer, his tone low, steady, threaded with something dangerous. "You really think I could?" Her lips parted, but no sound came out. He reached out slowly, brushing the edge of her jaw with his fingertips. His touch was careful, almost reverent. "You've spent your whole life running from what you are, but I've seen you, really seen you. You're not a curse, Aria. You're the reason I still believe there's something worth saving." Her chest tightened. Don't what?" he asked, voice soft but cutting. "Don't see you. Don't care." The air thickened. Every flicker of firelight cast new shadows across the cave walls, shadows that seemed to move with their heartbeat. She turned away, but he caught her wrist. His hand was warm against her skin. "Look at me." When she did, her breath hitched. Kael's eyes burned with something she didn't recognize. Not pity, not anger, but something that terrified her even more. "Every alpha before me died because they loved," he said. The words fell like stones into the silence. Aria froze, then loved no one. He laughed, quietly, bitterly, and shook his head. Too late. The space between them seemed to vanish. His breath brushed her cheek, his voice rough. "You think I don't feel it? The pull, the bond, the way the world stops when you look at me like that?" Her heartbeat stuttered. "That's not real." "Then tell me to stop." She didn't, because she couldn't. Their hands met between them, trembling. The contact was electric, the kind of heat that didn't burn but remembered fire. The mark on her wrist began to glow, faint at first, then brighter. Kael looked down as his own mark, hidden beneath the scars on his arm, flared in perfect sync. The same symbol, the same rhythm. Their connection was no longer a myth. It was real. It was alive. Aria gasped, trying to pull away, but the power surged through her, unstoppable. The mark pulsed once, twice, and she felt it, the echo of his heartbeat slamming into hers. Her body trembled, her skin burned. Kael gritted his teeth, struggling against the same force. His voice came out strained, almost a growl. The bond sealing itself. "Make it stop," she whispered. "I can't." Their marks flared once more, light spilling across the walls of the cave, as though the goddess herself had branded them both. For a heartbeat, neither of them could move. Then, just as their lips met, barely, a breath apart, the air split open. A howl shattered the night. Long, low, and ancient. The sound wasn't from any living wolf. It came from the mountains, from the stars, from her. The moon goddess. The warning was unmistakable. The fire flickered. The glow on their skin dimmed. The temperature dropped until their breath turned to frost. Aria jerked back, shaking, eyes wide. She's watching. Kael didn't deny it. She's always watching. He stood slowly, jaw tight. But I don't answer to her anymore. The mark on his wrist still glowed faintly, like a wound refusing to heal. Aria's voice cracked. You don't understand. The bond between us, it's not just forbidden, it's deadly. He looked down at her, his expression carved from pain and defiance. Then let it kill me. The words hung there, raw, reckless, true, and at that moment, the storm outside began again. The wind screamed through the canyon, carrying whispers of things unseen. Aria turned toward the cave mouth, the firelight flickering across her face, torn between fear and something deeper. Kael took one step closer. You can run again if you want, but wherever you go, I'll find you. Her eyes filled with tears. Why? His voice was quiet, almost tender. Because you're the only thing in this cursed world that makes me feel alive. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of everything they hadn't said, everything they both wanted to but couldn't. And outside, the moon broke through the clouds. Her light fell across the snow, illuminating two wolves carved by fate and fire. One bound by fear, the other by love, too dangerous to name. But neither turned away. Because some bonds are written not in choice but in blood and destiny. And theirs had just begun to burn. If this moment makes your heart tremble, stay with us, because in the next breath, fate will demand its price. The snow had melted into mud by the time they came for her. No warning, no sound, just the whisper of steel and the scent of betrayal carried on the morning wind. Aria had felt it first, the prickle at the back of her neck, the shift in the air that told her something ancient was watching. Then came the footsteps, dozens of them, wolves in armor, bearing the mark of the Moon Council. Kael's pack. She rose from the fire where she'd been kneeling, eyes narrowing. The flames reflected off her skin. Soft at first, then sharp, like the blade of a crescent moon. Kael, she whispered, they've found us. He was already on his feet, his body tense, gaze hardening as he turned toward the shadows gathering beyond the cave mouth. The first to step forward was his baiter, Roran, the one who had once called him brother. Now his voice was sharp with venom. Alpha, Roran said, stand aside. The council has spoken. The girl must die. Kael didn't move. His eyes, silver and burning, flickered between the men he'd led into battle and the woman who had changed everything. Aria stood behind him, barefoot, bruised, unarmed. But she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Not after everything she'd seen in his eyes. Kael's voice was low. You come into my territory, bearing judgment that isn't yours to give, Roran growled. Your territory died when you chose her. The council calls her Flameborn, the goddess's curse given flesh. You think we can defy that? Aria flinched. Flameborn. The word carried centuries of fear. It was the name whispered to frighten children, the myth mothers told when they spoke of ruin. Kael stepped forward. She's no curse. Then what is she? Roran snapped. The forest burns where she walks. The sky splits when she bleeds. You've seen it. We all have. She's the end of us. Kael's fist clenched at his sides. If she is the end, he said, then maybe we deserve it. The pack stirred. A murmur rippled through them. Disbelief, anger, fear. Aria's voice broke through the storm. Kael, stop. But he didn't. He couldn't. His gaze stayed locked on the wolves he'd once called family. The council's decrees are the same lies that chained our kind for generations. We worship a goddess who demands obedience but gives nothing in return. You think her will is justice? It's controlled. A snarl rose from the crowd. Roran stepped closer, teeth bared. Careful what you say, Alpha. The moon hears all. Kael's laugh was cold. Then let her. The world seemed to hold its breath, and then, from the shadows, another figure emerged. Clad in white and silver, The sigil of the moon burned into her robes. A high seer of the council. Her presence made even the air tremble. Her voice was calm, but sharp as ice. Kael Draven, you stand before the will of the moon. The woman behind you bears the mark of ruin. If you stand with her, you stand against us. The silence that followed could have swallowed the sun. Aria's heart stopped. She looked at him, the man who had held her when the world broke, the man who had promised to protect her even from himself. Would he? His jaw flexed. His chest rose and fell. Every breath he took was a war. Then I stand alone. The words fell like thunder. Gasps rippled through the pack. Some lowered their eyes. Others raised their weapons. The seer's voice did not waver. So be it. When dawn rises, both the Alpha and his flame will be ashes. Aria stepped forward, trembling, voice shaking. Don't do this for me. Kael turned to her, eyes blazing. You think I have a choice? Her lips parted, to protest, to beg, to say anything that would stop the storm already building. But it was too late. The first spear flew. Kael moved before she could blink. His wolf surged beneath his skin, claws and fury meeting steel. The sound of the impact echoed through the valley. A song of chaos, fire, and pain. Aria's power flared instinctively. Flames burst from her hands, bright and wild. The snow at her feet hissed and turned to steam. The battle was madness. Wolves lunged from the shadows, their eyes filled with fear, not rage. Kael fought like the storm itself, raw, relentless. But for every enemy he cut down, 2 more rose. And the seer stood still in the chaos, lips moving in silent prayer. Then came the pain. A chain of moonsteel, thrown from somewhere in the fray, wrapped around Aria's wrists. She screamed as her skin burned, the silver slicing through her power like poison. Kael turned at the sound, his eyes wild. No, but the chain tightened, pulling her to her knees. The seer's voice carried over the roar of fire. The flameborn dies here, and the curse ends. Aria's body shook, her vision blurred. She could feel her power slipping away, pulled from her veins like light draining from the world. Kael charged through the storm, claws shredding steel, blood painting the snow. He reached her, tore the chains apart, but not before they burned symbols into her skin, symbols that glowed like dying stars. She looked up at him through the haze, tears mingling with ash. You shouldn't have come back. And let them take you. You can't fight the goddess, she gasped. Kael's eyes flashed. Watch me. He turned to the seer. If you wanted a monster. The ground split beneath them. Fire and shadow collided, the temple stones cracking under the force of her awakening. Then you made one. Her flames erupted, searing through the chains, devouring everything, the walls, the sigils, the air itself. Screams filled the night, wolves scattered. The seer fell to her knees, her robes catching fire. Kael shielded Aria with his body, but the flames didn't burn him. They recognized him. The bond between them shimmered. Light and shadow, love and ruin entwined. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to stop, and then it shattered. The temple collapsed in a thunder of stone and flame. Kael's roar split the heavens as he reached through the fire, calling her name. Aria! But she was gone. The fire consumed everything. The smoke rose like a funeral hymn. When it cleared, only silence remained. Kael stood in the ruins, the world ash around him. His hands shook, his chest heaved. His mark, once bright, now flickered faintly like a dying flame. He fell to his knees. The scent of her still lingered, wild, bright, unbearable. Behind him, the survivors of his pack watched from the tree line. None spoke, none dared. The seer's body lay broken among the stones. Her final words were whispered on the wind, faint but cruelly clear. The bond was never meant to be. Kael's voice was a rasp of fury. Then the moon should have chosen better. He clenched his fists, silver eyes wet with fury and grief. And far beyond the ruins, deep in the burning forest, a single ember moved. Aria. Her body broken, her fire dimmed, but her spirit alive. The mark on her wrist glowed faintly through the soot. She could still feel him. His heartbeat echoed faintly through the bond, weak, distant, but there. She pressed her hand against the mark, tears streaking down her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "but I can't be what they fear." The wind carried her words through the dying forest, through the ruins of the temple, to the man who still knelt in the ashes. Kael lifted his head. He thought he'd imagined it. Her voice, her warmth, the way the air still tasted of her flame. But he hadn't. He could feel her moving away. The bond pulsed once, faintly, heartbreakingly, and then silence. The night swallowed the sound of his howl, raw, broken, endless. If your heart is shattered with his, stay close, because in the next chapter, even the moon will bleed. The world had burned, and from its ashes, she rose. The mountain loomed above the ruined forest, ancient, jagged, a spine of the earth itself. Its peaks tore through the clouds, dusted in ash and blood. The snow that clung to its ridges hissed and melted where her bare feet touched it. Aria climbed. Every step was agony. Her body raw, her veins still lined with silver burns, her breath sharp as broken glass. But she didn't stop. The wind howled around her, carrying whispers that weren't her own. Monster, curse, flameborn. Each name lashed her skin like a whip. Still, she climbed. At the summit, the world fell silent. The moon hung low, enormous, ghost-pale, and beneath its glow stood a figure woven from starlight and shadow. The moon goddess. Her form shifted with each breath, woman, wolf, fire, void, every face that ever haunted mortal dreams. Her voice, when it came, was soft and vast. "You have come far, child," Aria's voice cracked. "You made me this." The words came out a snarl, a sob, a wound. "You made me burn." The goddess tilted her head. "I made you a choice." Aria's fists clenched. The mark on her wrist, Kael's mark, pulsed faintly, dim as dying ember. "A choice to destroy everything I touch?" The goddess stepped closer. "A choice to end what should never have been." The wind screamed through the peaks. Aria's flames flickered, coiling around her like desperate spirits. "I didn't ask to be your weapon." The goddess's eyes gleamed like moons. "No one asks, but some are born to carry the fire that others fear." Aria's laugh was bitter. "Then tell me, what am I now? A savior? A curse? A story you'll rewrite when it's over?" The goddess's expression softened, not mercy but recognition. "You are the balance between ruin and rebirth, and your time has come." The air trembled. Aria's power surged, rising like a storm inside her chest. Her flames, once red, fierce, chaotic, began to shift. They softened to gold, then to white, no longer burning, but becoming. Her pain didn't vanish. It transformed. The fire was no longer devouring her. It was listening. She fell to her knees, gasping as light poured from her palms, threads of brilliance weaving into the air. The mountain itself glowed beneath her touch, and from the horizon, footsteps echoed, uneven, heavy, desperate. Kael. He was barely standing. Blood streaked down his side, his armor hung in tatters. His silver eyes found her at once wide with disbelief. "Aria." Her name broke from his throat like prayer and pain. She turned, tears glimmering in her eyes. "You shouldn't have come." He stumbled forward, every movement a battle. "You think I'd let you face her alone?" The goddess watched them, silent, vast, eternal. Kael looked up at her, baring his teeth though his strength was fading. "You took everything from her. You made her hate what she is." The goddess's voice was calm. "I made her what she must become." Aria stepped between them, firelight swirling from her fingertips. Enough. This ends tonight. Kael reached for her arm, his hand trembling. If you fight her, you'll die. Her eyes met his, fierce, luminous, alive. Then I'll die as who I was meant to be. The goddess's expression didn't change, but the air grew heavy, divine and dangerous. You defy me, child. Aria lifted her chin. No, I will replace you. The ground split. The mountain groaned as power, ancient and infinite, tore through the sky. From the heart of the earth, darkness rose, thick, crawling, alive. It moved like smoke, but darker, deeper, older. The goddess turned sharply. No. Kael staggered back as the shadows took shape, a form vast and monstrous, with eyes like black suns. The Shadow King, the true curse, the thing the moon had buried beneath her light for eons. Its voice was the sound of death remembering its name. You kept me caged. You fed me her kind. Now your light wanes and I rise. The goddess raised her hand, but her glow flickered. Her power, once endless, faltered in the presence of what she had hidden. Aria's flames wavered, sensing the ancient cold pressing against her skin. Kael stepped forward, barely standing. What is that? The goddess's answer was a whisper. What remains when faith dies? The Shadow King lunged. The air fractured under its weight. Darkness swallowed the moonlight. Kael grabbed Aria, shielding her as the blast struck. They hit the ground hard, rolling through ash and stone. He coughed blood, his body trembling. You can't fight both. Not her and that. Aria's gaze hardened. Then I'll stop them both. She rose, light blazing from her chest, her hair lifting like a living flame. Her mark, their bond, ignited, no longer dim but radiant. Kael could feel it, her heartbeat pulsing through his veins, her power wrapping around him like fire made flesh. The goddess tried to reach her, but the light burned her touch. Aria, if you take that power, you cease to be mortal. Aria's voice rang clear, a melody of defiance and sorrow. Then I was never mortal to begin with. She opened her arms. The fire within her split the night apart. The Shadow King roared, a sound that shattered mountains and bent the sky. Its tendrils of darkness coiled around her, trying to consume her light. But her flames didn't fight. They merged. White fire spiraled upward, devouring shadow, reshaping it. Every scream, every wound, every tear she had ever shed became fuel. The goddess watched, wide-eyed, as the impossible happened. The fire and darkness fused into something new. Balance. Aria's voice echoed across the mountain, layered and unearthly. I am not your curse. I am not your weapon. I am not your sacrifice. Her body glowed brighter, the very air trembling around her. Kael stumbled toward her, shouting over the roar. Aria, you'll burn yourself away. She turned to him, light spilling from her eyes. No, I'm setting myself free. She reached out, and her hand found his. Their marks flared, binding light and flesh, soul and flame. The bond snapped into place, not as fate decreed, but as they chose. The Shadow King howled, fracturing into shards of night that dissolved into her fire. The goddess fell to her knees, her celestial light dimming, her voice barely a whisper. Child, what have you done? Aria's answer was soft, but it shook the heavens. I became what you feared most, myself. The mountain split open, releasing a shockwave of gold and silver light that tore across the world. Forests regrow in seconds. Rivers boiled, then ran clear. The ruins of Kael's packed lands shimmered into dawn. When the light faded, Aria stood alone. Her hair was white to starlight, her eyes molten gold. The fire that once consumed now radiated peace. Kael was on his knees before her, chest heaving, awe and heartbreak carved into his face. Aria, she smiled faintly, you kept your promise. He rose shakily, reaching for her, but as his hand neared, she shimmered, half light, half memory. "No," he whispered. "Don't go." Her gaze softened. "I'm not going. I'm becoming." He shook his head, tears streaking through the dirt on his face. "I can't lose you again." She touched his cheek, her fingers warm, real, and yet not. "You never will. The fire doesn't end. It lives in what it loves." The wind rose. Her light began to scatter, particles of flame lifting into the air like fireflies. Kael clutched her hand until there was nothing left to hold, only warmth, only light. The moon hung silent above them, no longer goddess, no longer ruler, just witness. Kael stood alone on the mountain, the world remade beneath him. He raised his face to the stars. "She wasn't your weapon," he said, voice breaking. "She was your redemption." And the night answered with a single flare of light across the sky, a comet burning white and gold. It lingered for only a moment before fading into dawn. And from the ashes of love and ruin, a new world breathed, but even rebirth carries its shadow, for where there is light, something waits to return. The war ended not with a roar, but with silence, the kind of silence that felt alive, like the world itself was holding its breath, afraid to move for fear of breaking what little remained. The sky was painted in bruised colors, crimson bleeding into gray. The blood-red dawn stretched across the horizon, casting its mournful glow over the ruins of the once mighty mountain. Smoke coiled upward, like ghosts ascending to the heavens. The scent of ash clung to the air, thick and metallic, heavy with memory. The wolves, what was left of them, knelt, not out of command, not out of allegiance, but because there was nothing else to do. The battle had burned through everything they believed in, packs, bloodlines, gods. They bowed to the silence because silence was all that was left to worship. Kael stood apart from them. The wind tugged at the torn edges of his cloak. His body bore the marks of the war, silver burns crawling up his neck, claw wounds healing slow, each one a scar that whispered her name. His hands, still trembling, cupped a handful of ashes that shimmered faintly in the dawn light. Her ashes, the remnants of fire that had once burned brighter than the sun. Aria's fire. He didn't know how long he'd been standing there. Hours, maybe days. Time had folded in on itself, soft and strange. The world had survived, but he wasn't sure he had. The other wolves watched him from a distance, afraid, reverent, guilty. None dared to approach. The man who had defied gods, who had stood beside the woman they'd called Curse, was not someone they knew how to look at anymore. Kael knelt slowly, fingers closing around the ash, letting it slip through his palm like fine sand. The grains glowed faintly before scattering into the wind. "Why?" he murmured, his voice cracked and hoarse, raw from too many screams swallowed by fire. "Why you and not me?" The wind stirred. A whisper threaded through it. Soft, familiar, a sound that didn't belong in this world anymore. "You can't curse love, Kael. You can only fear it." His breath caught. For a heartbeat, he thought he imagined it. A trick of exhaustion, a fragment of memory looping in his mind. But then the air shifted again, warm against his skin. The ashes glowed brighter in his hand, silver light pulsing like a heartbeat. Her heartbeat, his vision blurred. He blinked, but tears spilled anyway, one falling onto the ash, turning to a small, perfect spark of light before it vanished. The last remnant of her. And in that instant, the mark on his wrist, the one they'd shared, the one that had bound them in pain and love alike, flickered, then faded, burning out in a single shimmer of silver fire. Gone. He exhaled, the sound breaking from him like a sob swallowed too deep. Above, the moon hung pale and quiet, no longer the bleeding god eye of the war. It was calm now, soft, almost human in its sorrow. For the first time since the world tore open, It looked peaceful. Kael straightened, his movement slow, deliberate, as though rising from a grave. His gaze swept across the battlefield, the shattered temple stones, the charred bones of trees, the faint steam rising from the soil where divine fire had burned through darkness. Everything was alive again, but not the same. Where her flames had scorched, flowers were blooming, silver blossoms that pulsed faintly under the dawn, life sprouting from ruin, beauty claws its way out of grief. A single wolf, an old one, with fur gone pale from age and battle, limped toward him. He bowed his head low. "Alpha," the wolf rasped. "What now?" Kael didn't answer at first. His eyes were distant, locked on the horizon, where the first light of day broke through the mist. "I don't know," he said at last, his voice soft, almost childlike. "She was the one who knew where we were going." The old wolf lowered his gaze. "She saved us all." Kael nodded once. "And they'll forget her for it." The wolf hesitated. "Not all of us." Kael looked down at his palms. The ashes were gone. Only the faint shimmer of light remained on his skin. Then even that faded. He clenched his fists, swallowing hard. "Tell them to bury the dead. Rebuild what we can. And you?" "I'll find her." The old wolf's ears twitched. "But she's gone." Kael's eyes glinted, fierce even in grief. "So was I. Once." He turned away, his cloak trailing over the broken ground, boots crunching through ash and frost. Each step was slow, heavy, but sure. Behind him, the pack began to move, their howls rising into the new dawn. Not songs of victory, but mourning. A requiem that carried through the valleys, echoing off the mountains like the heartbeat of the fallen. Kael paused at the edge of the clearing. The wind shifted again, brushing against him with warmth that didn't belong in the cold air. He could almost feel her beside him. The way she used to stand, shoulder to shoulder, chin lifted in defiance, eyes bright, even when the world called her monster. He smiled, small, broken, real. "You're still here, aren't you?" he whispered. Silence. Then, faintly, a flicker of silver light crossed the horizon. The moon dipped lower, almost as if bowing. He took that as an answer. The days that followed bled together. The wolves rebuilt what they could. New packs formed where old ones had fallen. Alliances were forged, not through dominance, but through shared loss. Whispers of the flame of the moon spread through the lands, a story of a girl who burned gods and saved wolves. Some said she was divine. Others said she was a myth. Kael said nothing. He kept to the borders, where the forest met the plains, where the wind carried her warmth. He spoke to her sometimes, not out loud, but inside, where words didn't need sound. When he hunted, he felt her breath in the leaves. When he slept, her laughter threaded through the wind. When he dreamed, she came to him, not in fire, but in light. The first night he saw her again, it wasn't in full form. Just a shimmer, like moonlight taking shape. She stood at the edge of the woods, hair glowing faintly, eyes soft with sorrow. He didn't move. He didn't dare blink. "Aria," he breathed. Her voice was the whisper of wind through branches. "You found me." He took a step toward her, but as soon as he moved, she began to fade. He reached out, his fingers passing through light. "Don't go." She smiled, that same sad, fierce smile he'd fallen for. "I never left." And then she was gone again. He dropped to his knees, pressing his forehead to the earth, tears cutting through the dirt on his face. The world was alive. The packs were free. The curse was broken. But so was he. And yet, in that breaking, there was something new. Hope. A fragile, flickering thing. Like her flame, always there, even when the night swallowed everything else. Days passed, then weeks. The moon cycled again. Full. Waning. New. Each time it rose, its glow grew stronger, clearer, and warmer. And one night, as Kael stood atop the cliff where she'd vanished, He saw it, a single streak of fire cutting across the sky. Not a falling star, a wolf's shape, burning in silver light. The wind carried her voice again, faint but sure. The story isn't over. He closed his eyes, the smallest of smiles breaking through the grief. No, he whispered, it never was. The dawn that followed wasn't blood-red this time. It was gold, warm, healing. The world had begun again, and somewhere, beyond the veil of mortal fire, a goddess watched with quiet eyes. Her hand brushed the threads of fate, weaving two souls into something eternal, not bound by pain, not by power, but by memory, by love. If this story found you, if it made you feel, breathe, or remember, subscribe to Wild Moon Narratives. Because here, we tell tales that burn, heal, and rise silver, a wounded eye watching over a world reborn from ash. Its light fell faintly across an endless desert, the kind untouched by time or mercy. The dunes rolled like the backs of sleeping beasts, the wind whispering ancient names through the shifting sands. And there, in the heart of that barren sea, something moved. A hand, small, trembling, pushing through the dust. Fingers curled against the coarse grit, nails streaked with gold light. Then an arm followed, slender but strong, glistening faintly beneath the moon's frail glow. The ground cracked, hissing as if scorched from within, and from that rent in the earth, a figure rose. A woman, barefoot, dust clinging to her legs like the remnants of a forgotten storm. Her hair, long and black as eclipse shadow, lifted gently in the heated wind. But her eyes burned like molten amber, golden fire, alive and aware. They opened slowly, deliberately, as though waking from centuries of sleep. When she exhaled, the sand around her stirred, the air shimmered. Heat rippled across the dunes, spreading outward in quiet waves. And there, beneath her collarbone, a mark gleamed, a spiraling emblem of flame, carved in luminous gold and silver. It pulsed once, twice, then flared bright enough to stain the night. She looked up at the dying moon, her lips parted, voice soft as dust and thunder entwined. She was not the only one born of fire. The wind stilled. The desert listened. Far across the dunes, the air trembled. The sound came low at first, a vibration in the bones, a whisper beneath the wind. Then it deepened, darkened, and rose into something wild. A howl. Long, haunting, echoing across the horizon. Not of grief this time, not even a warning. It was a call, an answer. The woman tilted her head, listening, a faint smile curling at the corner of her mouth. The sound made her eyes flicker brighter, recognition, ancient and intimate, passing through her expression. She whispered into the wind, almost as if speaking to the ghost of a memory. "So, you still walk this world?" The wind caught her words, carrying them across the sand, across the mountains, across the places where the fire once burned. The ground beneath her feet quivered again. This time, it wasn't the shifting of the dunes. It was something deeper, something alive, a heartbeat, faint, ancient, but real. The sand split open before her. Beneath, not darkness, but molten light. Rivers of glowing magma surged beneath the surface, carving veins of fire through the desert floor. She did not step back. She stepped forward. Each footfall left a trace of gold light behind her. Her gaze turned toward the horizon, where the faintest shimmer of moonlight met the earth. And far beyond that, in a land still healing, Kael stirred from a restless dream. He woke with a start, sweat clinging to his skin. The night was cold, yet the air felt thick with heat. He sat up slowly, pulse hammering. The fire. He could feel it again. It wasn't Aria's. He knew that. Her flame had been pure, white gold, soft as breath. This one was different, sharper, wilder. It bit through the dark like a blade. Kael rose, stepping to the mouth of his cave. The forest outside was quiet. Too quiet. The moon hung low, thin and trembling. And then, a voice, distant but distinct, threaded through the night. The fire does not die, it remembers. His breath caught. He turned toward the sound, eyes narrowing, heart thundering in his chest. Somewhere, far to the south, a faint glow streaked across the horizon, gold and red, rising from the desert like dawn reborn. He whispered her name, though he didn't know who she was. He only knew what the fire meant. Destiny was not done. The world had only paused to grieve. Now, it will awaken. Back in the desert, the woman stood upon a dune's crest, her hair rippling in the fierce wind. Around her, the sand began to shift, swirling upward, forming spirals, taking shape. Wolves made of dust and light emerged, circling her in silence. Their eyes gleamed with reflected fire, their movements precise and reverent. She raised her hand. The wolves bowed their heads. "The moon chose her," she said softly, "but the flame chose me." The ground beneath her pulsed again, the deep rhythmic sound of something vast and old stirring in the earth's core. And then she smiled, a slow, dangerous thing that gleamed like a blade catching light. "Let them rebuild their peace," she murmured. "Let them forget what fire costs." Her hand clenched. Flame erupted from the dunes, towering high, kissing the sky. From miles away, the light reached the horizon where Kael stood. He shielded his eyes as the desert ignited, painting the night in gold and blood red. He knew what it meant. Something was coming. Something born from the same divine curse that had once tried to consume them all. But this one did not burn for salvation. It burned for vengeance. The wind carried the first hint of her scent, smoke and wild jasmine, undercut with something electric and unfamiliar. Kael's wolf stirred within him, restless, alert. He whispered to the night, voice low and certain. Then it begins again. The desert storm rose, carrying sand high into the heavens. Lightning split the sky, illuminating her silhouette, proud, defiant, alive. And as the first thunder rolled, her eyes glowed brighter. The moon, frail and pale, flinched beneath her light. Because this time, it wasn't the moon's fire that stirred the world. It was something older, unclaimed, unforgiving. A new name would rise from the ashes of the old prophecy, one written not by gods or fate, but by flame itself. The second flame has awakened. If this story lit something inside you, subscribe to Wild Moon Narratives, because here we tell tales that burn, that rise, and that never truly end.